Welcome to Philanthropy SA. This is a podcast about and for the philanthropic community in San Antonio and South Texas. We introduce organizations and people who are making an impact in the community. Beneficent Financial is proud to sponsor this podcast, and it is our hope that you enjoy this conversation about the impact we can have. The goal is to edify and inspire. Now please join our host, Dan Rebmann.
Hi, welcome to Philanthropy SA. I'm your host, Dan Rebmann, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by Jarrell Flowers. He is the executive director of the RISE movement here in San Antonio. Thanks for joining me, Jarrell.
Man, thank you for having me, Dan. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Glad. And we're going to go through our usual kind of approach here, which is we're going to talk to Jarrell about him and what brought him here and why he does what he does, and then want to hear all about the RISE movement. But I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to give a tease. So one of the reasons that I wanted Jarrell here is because I heard a great presentation that he gave on how to work with younger folks in ministry groups, nonprofits, the workplace in general, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. As somebody who just hired somebody who recently graduated from college, I mean, it really resonated, some of the stuff that he had. So what I'm letting you know is stick around to the end because that's where the good stuff is. Or you could fast forward. No, we don't want you to fast forward. That's not good.
Right.
And I've never said like or subscribe either. You didn't realize that? I've never said that. I just said it, but I didn't mean it. I don't want you to like and I don't want you to subscribe. Just listen. Okay. So here we go. Jarrell. So I always ask people how you came to San Antonio. I have a hunch I know how you came to San Antonio, but why don't you tell us anyway?
Yeah. So my parents were my parents were in the military in Germany. That's where I was born. And when they got stationed to San Antonio, I was about 2 or so. And then I don't remember anything about Germany. People ask me like, do you know German or do you still have a? I'm like, no, I don't. But
du kannst nicht gut Deutsch sprechen. Das tut mir leid. Ich wohnte dort drüben für fast 4 Jahre.
And so. Yeah, and to that I say amen to whatever you do. But yeah, so my parents actually ended up getting stationed to Kelly Air Force Base. It was Kelly Air Force Base at the time. So we grew up on base housing and all that kind of stuff. And then my parents got out of the military, my mom first, and then my dad later on. After 12 years of serving in the Air Force, he got out of the military, went into full-time ministry. We went to the west side of San Antonio, and when I was about 10 or so, and then spent a lot of time there until I moved out. Yeah.
Very good. Well, that's kind of a classic San Antonio story because so many people get their first exposure through the military. And certainly that was the case for me. I did combat field medic training at Fort Sam back in the day, and all that. And when I got out, my wife said, I want to live someplace warm. And I said, I know a place. And then she's spent the last 32 years telling me I didn't mean this warm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyway, no, that's a classic. That's a classic how you got to San Antonio story. Mm-hmm. So, but you're now all grown up, so you can make your own decisions, and you decided to stay. So
yes.
Tell us about what kind of caused you to stay here, and then what led you to get involved, stay involved, outside the world of traditional commerce kind of thing in the nonprofit ministerial world.
Yeah. So my parents, after they got out of the military, they went into full-time ministry. My dad was associate pastor of the church that he now is a senior pastor of. So I grew up in church, you know what I mean? And so that was just kind of
all day Sunday, Wednesday nights,
Sundays and Wednesdays. Oh man, and then you got some of the Bible studies and all these different kind of things. And my parents again, they worked at that church, and so late nights we were there, just doing stuff, and so running around being kids, And so man. After I graduated. I graduated from Castle Hills First Baptist and ended up I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I knew I had this gifting to write hip hop. I hadn't performed at that point, but I just knew I had this passion to write. So I just thought I was just going to pursue that and then just get a job and just try to hustle and make my music dreams come true. And one person in my dad's youth ministry at the time was like, hey, I think your son should go to this place. It's called Texas Bible Institute out in Columbus, Texas. And I was not trying to do that. And, but as it happens, I was driving one day, got into a car accident, and the Lord used that to challenge me of if I was actually following Jesus or if I was just kind of doing the church thing. Was I an actual disciple who had laid down my life to follow Jesus, my will, my ways? Have I laid that down to follow Jesus? And I said no. After that point, I was like, no, I'm just kind of living for me with the Jesus veneer over it. And so I ended up going to Bible school, which the place where I didn't want to go. I ended up going, went there for 2 years, and thank God I did, because that's where I met my wife. And so came back, and I was trying to, again, do this whole hip hop thing. And I was trying to get a job, could not get a job anywhere. Like I was applying at all these different places, could not get a job. And then my dad's like, hey, at that point he had become the senior pastor, and he was like, hey, we might have an opening for a youth position. I'm like, I don't want to do the youth. And so, so sometimes I say, hey, I wanted to rap to the kids, but I didn't want to like be with the kids. And so that was kind of like my story. But, in there, again, it was just like this moment of surrender, right? And it was just like, okay, God, is this you? And so I did it. And then the Lord just started breaking my heart for the generation. It started breaking my heart for the city. Just seeing things happening in the city, man. I'm like, man, we need revival. We need transformation in our city. And so that actually gave my music then began to give language to some of the stuff that I was experiencing. Right. And so, it became that much more effective. And so, it's the reason why I'm here. I've had like plenty of opportunities to leave, just as many other artists have, right. Sure. In the city. But I really do have a burden for the city, and I have a heart to see the city prosper. I want to see it function at its highest and best. And I'm like, Lord, I'm here for that, So
that's awesome. That is awesome. And so when you mentioned that, there's opportunities, and I mean, certainly when you think of, artistic havens, I mean, obviously the coasts and that type of thing, sure. But even like Nashville and, there's other places that are better known for their art scenes. And yet, you started a ministry that is kind of, caters to artistic people. Mm-hmm. So why don't you talk a little bit about the Rise movement and the components and all of that? Yeah.
So one thing, man, one of the things I love about you is that you really do have a heart for revival and for transformation. And so you get that, when you're living in a city, sometimes there's nothing happening, right? There's nothing happening or flowing, and God uses people to kind of be forerunners and, to make things happen in the city. You know what I mean? Or actually a better way to say that is to partner with him in making things happen in the city, because God's always moving, but everybody isn't really tuned in a lot of times to that and willing to lay down their thing for gospel advancement. Right.
Real quick, because you just hit on something that's so often we say, hey, I need God to be with us, or no. God needs us to be with him.
Right.
He's there.
Yeah.
He's, he's the path is, when we're far apart, it's not, him getting closer to us. It's vice versa. Anyway,
and God, for me, like God has a kingdom vision for San Antonio, right? And he has a kingdom vision for the creatives here in San Antonio. And so, but a lot of times our eyes are not open to what he's doing because we're kind of focused on, what we want to do, And so for me, one of the ways that God opens our eyes is through our own need. And then we become the answers to the problems that that we are facing, right? We now become a solution. We become the answered prayer to, the prayers that we're praying. And so for me, I was on staff at church. I was also touring at the same time. So touring and trying to oversee worship ministry, arts ministries, all these different ministries. And I got burned out and I felt like I didn't have anybody to relate to as a creative. Told my wife about it, and she suggested that I invite some friends to the house. And I did that. And so it was a life-giving experience for me. And I linked this, it was kind of a lack of understanding of people understanding me as a creative. I linked that to the fact that I'm a creative and I might be a little bit different than people that I'm encountering. And so I need to find my tribe, find my people. And so I ended up putting this thing out there online about like, hey, any other creatives out there need community, essentially, right? I put it on, we made a little page and for people to sign up. And yeah, within 2 weeks, like 200 people signed up.
Oh my goodness.
And they're from like different parts of the city. But then of course they were from different parts of the country, people who had followed my music and they were doing all that kind of stuff. So I was like, man, this has a potential, like there's a need. It just spoke to the need for creatives to find community. And so, so we started doing monthly hangouts here in the city. So we started doing house concerts and we go to parks and all these different things, right? And just hanging out as Kingdom family of creatives. And yeah, then 2020 happened and we weren't meeting anymore. And so after that, I decided to focus on a group that was kind of organically forming within the wider community. And we started doing some discipleship there. Long story short, leaders started coming and saying, hey, I want to lead a group with Rise. So it started off as this one group, and it's now turned into a network of communities called the Rise Movement. So
that's awesome. Man. What are some of those communities?
Yeah, man, they vary. So there's a photography and videography community called SA Creatives. There's one for worship leaders called Rise Worship Collective. There is one that's actually a church plant that reaches college students. It's called Nomadic. There is one called Legacy Lens that reaches kids, and they're helping them with like videography and storytelling and all these different kind of things. There's a group for pastors and leaders who are trying to equip and establish the next generation. That one's called One City Collective. And yeah, man, there's a hip hop community called Rap Society. And yeah, so those are 6 right now, and then we're planting 4 more at the end of the year. A prison ministry and other ones, but they're all like reaching people through creative means. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So as you're, looking around and trying to figure out, how do you keep all that organized? How do you keep all that?
I don't.
Okay.
But my wife and my team, they are amazing. I'm just like, I'm the vision guy, and I'm like, hey, let's, it's interesting that you asked me that question, because I had to this year purposefully say, hey, we're going to go deeper, not wider. In other words, we're not going to add more communities. We're going to invest heavily into the communities that we already have and teach them to make disciples and to multiply. Right. So that's our heart right now. And, but in the meantime, we have our Rise movement is a 501c3, and we have a board. And so we have a director of operations. We have a business administrator. We have all these different people that play different roles. So I am not that guy. I'm not the organized guy, but my team is incredible. So they help out tremendously with that.
It's important to have a good team around you. So.
Yeah, and I feel like, man, with creatives, you can't get like too stiff and like super structured, or it doesn't feel organic and all that kind of stuff. And so, part of it is like we want to keep that. We want to keep that, and we want it to be an actual movement instead of an organization that's trying to plant different brands and all this kind of stuff. We don't want it to. We want it to be a kingdom family.
Sure.
So,
so I gotta ask: do you ever get pushback that hip hop isn't a good medium for Christian music and that kind of thing?
Oh yeah. I've been doing Christian hip hop for a while, and I always get, I always get that, but it really depends on the audience though, because sometimes hip hop it gives language to urban believers, but when you go to places where there's already this kind of outlook about what hip hop is, it's demonized before people can even hear the lyrics. You know what I mean? And so there's that aspect of it. And then you have people so that's one extreme. The other extreme is that you have people who they were saved. They came out of heavy hip hop culture. And so the only thing that legitimizes hip hop in their eyes is that it's preaching Jesus, and everything else about hip hop is just bad. Right. And so there's the other extreme of like, oh man, we got to preach Jesus. And they kind of miss out on a lot of other people who are just wanting to hear life experiences through a Christian lens. And they miss out on those people because they're just like, it's got to be Jesus or it's bad, Mm-hmm. And so it's like, so you kind of get it from both ends, You know what I mean? And so, to extremes, balance looks like being lukewarm, And so you just gotta, it's all part of the process, man.
Yeah. Well, and when you're dealing with creatives, it's a situation where there's always that issue of taste and what people like and enjoy, and it's like, this may really speak to you, but it doesn't speak to me, and that type of thing in that way. And so it's very hard to, in the artistic world, it's hard to have something that is universally loved, along those lines. But
yeah,
I mean, I remember back, because I'm older than you,
you are?
Yeah, more than a little.
Okay.
It's too bad we don't have video here. But I wish, but now hold on. I am going to call you out because you're a lot older than you look, man. So.
Yeah, I am, man. I would have just, I wish we would have just let that slide because, nobody sees the video.
That's what I'm saying. That's it. And now I got noises
now
coming
they got
from my
visuals.
phone.
They got visuals. Now.
I'm gonna probably have to have Mark cut all this part out. But no. So anyway, but I remember when like the notion of like Christian heavy metal.
Oh yeah,
Striper and that kind of stuff. Back in the day, it was the same type of thing.
Exactly.
It was that same type of thing. So anyway, I wanted to get your take on that because before I go any further down this road, it's probably a good time for us to stop and hear from our sponsor. We'll be right back.
Many of you out there care deeply about wanting to make an impact on the world around you. You want to help take care of the people and organizations that are important to you. We understand that because we feel the same way. Beneficent Financial wants to help you. Our mission is to help people like you with professional, individualized financial advice achieve their objectives. Whether your financial legacy will stay within your family or benefit the community at large, we are able to help. Call Beneficent Financial today at 210-999-5511. In addition to traditional wealth management, we offer philanthropic services such as direct donations of required minimum distributions, donor-advised funds, and foundations. Call 210-999-5511 or go online to beneficentfinancial.net. Let us help you do well so you can do good. Securities offered through Momentum Independent Network, member SIPC/FINRA.
Thanks for joining us. This is Dan Rebmann with Philanthropy SA, and I'm joined by Jarrell Flowers. He's the executive director of the RISE movement here in San Antonio. And we've been talking a lot about RISE and what it does and all that kind of stuff. But one thing that I just think, a lot of people could benefit from is kind of a synopsis of what you were talking about at the forum back a couple months ago when it comes to working with young people and kind of what they're looking for. Because I will tell you that in my discussions with people from nonprofits or even for-profit entities, one of the biggest, hurdles or things that seems to cause some issues is some people's perception of younger people's, and they'll use different phraseology, work ethic, or just how do you work with folks that outwardly or and probably inwardly just in a sense seem to value things differently than prior generations do. And how do you make that work in an organization that needs to be cross-generational and needs to reach a lot of folks and all that kind of thing? So you did a great job of that, and I'd love to give the audience an opportunity to hear that.
Yeah, I think, well, first, thank you. I think part of that is, working with people in this generation, the younger generation, every generation has a value set, right? And so if we don't understand what today's generation values, we're going to put our own values as primary, and we're not going to serve the next generation by looking at what their values are. And so a lot of times, man, today's leaders, who have built amazing things, right? They've built amazing companies and, all of these great things that leaders have done. One of the gaps, especially that Rise tries to fill is, okay, how do we help to, the leaders of today realize the value set of the next generation? How do we do that? How do we bridge that gap? And there's a scripture, in Chronicles that talks about the sons of Issachar understanding the times and knowing what to do, right? And that's a powerful phrase, because there's nothing better to me for leaders than to understand the times that they're in. Not the times that they succeeded in, which was like yesterday and 10 years ago and 20 years ago, but understand today's times and then know how to operate in today's times. And so if we're looking at today's times, one of the things that this generation values is empowerment, right? They want to be empowered. And so you look at, some of the revolutions that have happened in our country, and you see the Industrial Revolution, right? I use this as an example because I think it's so true. Like the highest, the highest goal for somebody in the Industrial Revolution at the time was to get a job in the factory, right? Some guy at the top has built this amazing factory, and your highest goal in life is to get a job in that factory. And then hopefully you can work your way up to the top, and you can have a window office, and it can be awesome for you. And everybody's just a cog in the wheel, right? We're not living in that time anymore. We're living in a time where things like Uber are happening, where people are like, you know what? Leaders are saying, how can we look at people and say, what do you have in your possession? How can we help you make a better life with what you already have? That's what Uber did, right? They're like, okay, these guys, these people have extra cars. They need extra money. How can we empower people to live better lives? Right? This is not just this factory model. It's an empowerment model. And so instead of having a gathering mindset, we're like, okay, everybody gather here and help build this big thing. Now it's more scattering, right? And so people want to be empowered. Young people, they really want to be empowered. And if they're not going to be empowered to live the life that they feel like they can live, then they're going to go somewhere else. And a leader of yesterday who's still trying to build the big buildings and the big things, they're going to look at that person and say, man, you have no work ethic. You have no consistency. Why can't you stay here? And why can't you just build? Because when I was coming up, fill in the blank, so it's that whole thing. But the value set is different, right? Yeah. There was, in the Industrial Revolution, people were willing to sacrifice their dreams to, their inner dreams and their inner desires to like possibly have a position at this factory. But that's not where we're at anymore. People are willing to take a risk and say, you know what, because of technology and all the things that are available to me, I can try to live the life that I want to live. And so when it comes to the kingdom, obviously, like we want people to follow Jesus. but we want them to follow in a way where it's empowering. You know what I mean? And it's not like, we're not trying to get people to join this factory where you're trying to work to build this big thing. It's dead. It's over, So, unfortunately, I feel like the church is kind of behind the curve in a lot of ways. And that's just statistically speaking, right? The church is kind of like 10 years behind culture a lot of times. And so culture's already looking for ways to empower through companies like Airbnb and Uber and all these other places where, Google searches, you know what I mean? like it's giving people this access to help them build better lives. And so I think the church is kind of catching up to that. And I think if we want to even have a voice in the discussion, we have to not be on the tail end of it, but actually have to lead the discussion in empowerment and we should, because that's what Jesus was all about, right? Like that's literally the Holy Spirit is empowering us to live out his mission. So
that's awesome. So, but the notion of empowerment, I mean, it's not confined to the church by any stretch. So,
not at all.
So, I mean, when we look at, a generation, and I'm thinking like my kids and their peers and that kind of thing, there's still like stuff that has to get done and that kind of thing, or boundaries that cannot get crossed or should not get crossed. And if they do get crossed, there needs to be, some repercussions for that and that type of thing. So how do you marry, that empowerment with a level of accountability, with a level of, there has to be some standard or something along those lines. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, with creative specifically, like, what you can find out really quickly is that if there are no boundaries, you go into no man's land, you know what I mean, real fast, because there's so many ideas and wow, look at the possibilities. The horizons are endless and we can do this, this, and this. And so there's gotta be boundaries. And so what I talk about a lot is the core values of an organization or anything like that. If there are core values in place, the good thing is that when those things are in place, people get a chance to say, hey, this is what I'm about, or no, this is what I'm not about. You know what I mean? Like the organization, like for Rise, we have our core values, everything from empowering people, amplifying creativity, all these different kinds of things. That putting that out there before people gives people the option, young people, creatives, the option to say, yeah, I'm about that. And I can live within that or not. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not telling you that you have to, we're not, our core values are not, like we're not dictating everything that people are having to do. It's not like a dictatorship thing, but it is boundaries, and so we're saying, hey, if you're going to be on this team, then these are the values that we expect. And so I think clear is kind, man. So if you're clear about your mission, if you're clear about your vision, then people can say yes or no to it. But if they say yes to it, then you have to hold them accountable to the value set. Yeah. So it is what you said. It's like it's trying not to be overwhelming. We call it in Rise, we call it high accountability, low control. So you're highly accountable to the values of the organization, but you're not being controlled and micromanaged over every little thing, right?
Right.
So yeah.
No, I like that, and that's the thing that because so many nonprofits rely on a group of folks that are very, idealistic. And I mean that in a good sense, like they are committed to the ideals of an organization and they want to make the world a better place.
Yes.
And that's, and they already know, especially getting in the nonprofit world, they may make less money doing that and that kind of thing. So they've already given up that, right? But that whole notion of that, they're not these little automatons that you can just plug and play and say, and when you talk to people in the nonprofit world, both within the church and secular and that type of thing, the notion of the burnout and that kind of thing that occurs within that space. I just think that your notion of, empowering and giving people freedom within, a structure of accountability and that type of thing is really, because a lot of times they want to come with the structure first.
Yes.
And say, here, do this and this and this. And then, anything else, better check with us first on that too. As opposed to the notion of saying, okay, look, we're trying to get this goal in mind. What gets us there? What can you do? Where do you see your skills fitting into that? And then that other realm.
Man,
so.
it is definitely a dance between what we call like relationships and results, right? It's invitation and challenge. It's like we want to challenge people to say, hey, we want you to be a high performer. We want you to follow, our core values and make sure that you're sticking to that. But I think also when it comes to working with this generation, right, younger generation, the relational capital's got to be there for you to make the challenge. It has to be there. And so when we're talking about empowering people, we can't assume that we know what empowerment looks like for them without having a relationship with them and asking them. And so if we ask them and say, hey, you actually get to know them and get to know what, what's in their heart and how they're wired and all that kind of stuff, then we can say, hey, this is the best way that I can empower you. This is what we're about. If this is in your heart, this is the best way that I can empower you. And if we can't empower you, then that's fine too. Maybe I can refer you to somebody else who's better suited for that. And that in and of itself is empowering as well, right? And so, but relationship is key. I get so many texts, man. It's just like, it's almost overwhelming sometimes, but these younger guys are like, hey bro, let's hang out, as if I don't have a whole life of my own.
Right.
But at the same time, relationships to me, relationships are the currency of the kingdom. And if you don't have relational capital, people are not going to trust you. And if people can't trust you, they're not going to let you empower them.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. And for the record, I've never gotten a text that says, hey, bro, come and hang out. So that's just not.
Except for sushi, maybe.
Except for sushi. Well, now, there we go. So anyway, no, that's awesome. So let me ask you this. If somebody's been hearing about all this and they're like, wow, I want to get involved with the Rise movement. Maybe they know a creative. Maybe they just, want to find out more of what's going on. I know, you all put on events around the city and that type of thing. What's the best way for somebody to reach out and get involved?
Yeah, we are on social media, but the best way is our website, which is risemovement.co. risemovement.co, and then that'll take you to, it'll explain everything, all of our vision and our mission, our pathway for helping to create leaders and all that kind of stuff. And then all of our social media stuff is there too. So risemovement.co.
That's beautiful. Anything else I didn't ask you that you wanted me to, man? Anything you want to talk about or?
Man, no, actually this is great. This is great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for being here. Jarrell, it's always a pleasure. Hope we get to do some sushi again soon, my friend.
Come on, somebody.
Yeah, although not eating meat right now, so we got to wait.
Yeah.
So we'll wait. We'll wait it out. It's okay. We could do tofu. You could do tofu.
I could do that.
There we go.
Or falafel. I can do falafel too.
Outstanding. Come on. We'll do a whole review of falafel here once we get off air. So I share a love of falafel. For Philanthropy SA, this is Dan Rebmann just reminding you to do well so you can do good.
Thank you for joining us at Philanthropy SA. We hope you found something to inspire you during today's conversation. If you know organizations and people who are making an impact in the community, we would love to hear about it. Until next time, do well so you can do good.